They arrested me, they blindfolded me, and they kept me in detention for 5 days before anybody came to see me, and I was not informed of my charges. Everything that they did was against the law. They did not have a warrant. They did not show me a warrant, so that was illegal arrest. It basically allows the lawyer to do the job for you.
Welcome to Unmuted. My name is Edwin Keshish-Abnous, and today we're happy to have Mansour Borji with us. Mansour is Advocacy Director for Article 18. It's a London-based group that works to protect and promote the religious freedom of Christian and other minorities in Iran. And the name of the group comes from Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This article protects people's right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, as well as their right to show their beliefs. Mansour has a lot of knowledge and experience to share in this work. He has publicly spoken against the state media in Iran, saying that they use clear examples of hate speech against evangelical Christians. Today, Mansour will talk about how Article 18 is working in a complicated setting of surveillance, legal restrictions, and high risk. He will also talk about how Iranian Christians are dealing with their fate under pressure and how people around the world can connect with this story, which is often hidden. Mansour, welcome. It is an honor to have you here on our podcast. And let me ask you the first question. In August 2025, state media called the recent arrest of Christians espionage, which you called a very clear example of hate speech. What patterns do you see in how authorities use this label as a weapon, and what counter-narratives actually make policymakers and platforms take action?
Well, I call it impunity, and the Iranian government uses these labels with impunity because they're not held accountable, whether nationally or internationally, for these clear examples of hate speech. So when you label a whole community of Christians as engaged in anti-government activities or espionage, you basically are giving a green light to your security officials and various government authorities to execute punishments, trials, and harsh punishments on Christians that are on trial. So it leads to violence. Those words can translate into lives that are destroyed, and years spent in prison, children growing up without their parents as they're being detained. And the base case scenario is when they flee the country and they're at the mercy of many other countries, whether or not they accept them, and they can spend many years of their lives in that uncertainty. So it has to be taken really seriously.
Yes. One of the things I'm sure you have noticed and our viewers know about it is that Iranian government always tries to connect the church to Zionism, and they call the Iranian church Zionist. And that is basically tied to the enmity that the Iranian government has had with Israel. Do you think, or have you noticed a reinforcement, a change in the fact that after the Iran and Israel war, that label is being more connected to Iranian churches inside the country?
Well, I would call that a political fallacy. It means it's partly true, because there are Christians who throw a blanket support for Israeli government, and in that sense, that's a scholarly debate. There are Christians who could be called Zionists, but to describe the entire community as Zionist Christians and draw a conclusion from that they're acting against the interests of the Iranian people, then that's what I call it, a fallacy. It's a means to an end. So that means they have predetermined that they're going to have a crackdown on activities of Christians because of religious zeals they have, because they want to satisfy the anger, basically, and resentment by those clergy who call for greater crackdown and punishment of Christian activities, you find a political means to justify those things. So it's rationalizing, it's justifying something that is completely both inhumane and also illegal. So there are of course lessons in that for the church to be more responsible about echoing or speaking up about their political interests, as it could translate in not in favor of the Iranian Christians living in this very hostile environment with the Islamic Republic.
Let me follow up with what the last sentence you said, that we need to be a little bit more wise when it comes to political status of ours. But let me ask you a question about some theological sightings. For example, those who are Messianic movements, or those who are in favor of the government of Israel and connecting it to the biblical narrative. Is that something you believe is going to affect the church in a negative way? When I'm saying church, I mean the Church of Iran.
I think it does. I have my personal view and the political theology I probably affiliate with. You cannot throw a blank check or give a blank check to any political ideology. Christians are called to be salt and light. They have to be critical of the actions of their own governments and others. Whether they do something godly, they need to admire that and condone that, encourage that. And if there's something that is against God's will, even if it's your own family, if it's in your own pastor, and also your own president or prime minister, you've got to speak up. It's the justice that breaks God's heart. And that's the line that needs to be drawn, not nationalistic ideologies that it's like you love a football team, and whatever that football team, whether good or worse, you've got to support them. You stick with them because that's what you're given. But that's not how we're dealt with. We're people of one kingdom, and that's kingdom of God, and anything else is subservient to that kingdom. So they need to align with God, and where they are aligned, good on them. If they're not, then you can be critical of them. So that's why I would say it's risky, because a reputational risk, but also in this case, it's a security risk for many Iranian Christians to be associated with the ideology. Many of them haven't even heard about it at all. Some of these Christians that are arrested, they get this blanket accusation and charge that they're engaged in Christian Zionist activities. And this is the first time they actually hear about it in the interrogation. So what is this? So they have to tell them about this, the interrogators, and that's when they realize, oh, there's such thing may exist. And upon their release, that's their first question. What is this? Can you help me figure this out? How can I defend myself? So yes, it is risky, and we've got to be responsible because it has ramifications.
You've mentioned that these leaked court files are a clear reminder of how religious freedom is systematically denied. What did those files show us about how the system really treats converts, and how should we understand the difference between the law and what actually happens?
Yes, I think you're referring to our joint annual report last year, where I actually wrote an analysis piece on Tehran's leaked judiciary files, and that was significant. Yes. Find. Perhaps not many human rights groups focus as much on this. It was over 3 million files hacked from the Iranian judiciary over a 15-year period. Everyone that had any criminal records registered, those files were leaked and was put on the web for people to see. So our colleagues went through all of these files, identified all that was related to Christians, and we narrowed in to see what they have spoken behind the scenes. So different judicial authorities, when they had correspondences, what did they say about these individuals? Or, for instance, the intelligence and security officials, when they wrote to the prosecutor's office, what were they saying about this question? When we realized there's a discrepancy, they, of course, have arrested and interrogated these people for religious reasons. But when that comes to actual court system, it suddenly gets rewarded. People are now penalized for what they actually have been kind of prescribed by the security officials. So we've been, saying this for years, that Iran does not have an independent judiciary, no matter how much its politicians try to whitewash us in the UN and other international arenas. They're actually controlled by the security apparatus in Iran. And the intelligence service and IRGC actually determine this. So they rule over the courts, and so they come with it. So we actually put in page 25 and 24, we put a summary of the cases last year, and that was 2024, and these 15 years, and you see quite similarity between those about the number of charges and brought against Christians and the themes that somehow correspond. So this was about claim of an NGO, a Christian NGO, that the Iranian government is trying hard to discredit, and comparing it with the more objective evidence that is before us, and that's the leaked judiciary files, and seeing exact patterns. So we felt a bit vindicated, and in this was the propaganda of the Iranian government with billions of dollars of funding and a lot more access to be exposed in such a radical way. So,
and can you give our audience an idea of the number or the percentage of these files related to the Christianity?
I think we should note that this is about just 15 years, and that's Tehran Prosecution Office only. It's not a nationwide thing, and in those files, there were 320 Christians prosecuted within this period between 2008 and 2023. And we showed how many of them received wide-ranging punishments, from 15-year in prison to exile, other what they call the complementary punishments.
When you mention exile, you mean exile from their own city to another city, but still within Iranian
within Iran. So
borders.
What we call it internal exile. Yes. And so then there were a number of Christian leaders who were ordained ministers. There were a percentage of them that were from Armenian and Assyrian Christians. So media likes to divide them between the categories. Oh, there's converts and there are Armenians and Assyrian. But that's not the case. That's not an easy one to make. So it's about recognized and unrecognized. That's how we like to phrase it. Even Armenians and Assyrians who do not align completely with the narrative and the set of restrictions that the Iranian government applies, then they fall out of this circle of recognized Christians, and they become unwanted entities. And that's people like Joseph and Victor and the rest that are named in our report that end up in prison.
And let me ask you a question. I'm not sure if I get this right, but you're the right person to ask this question. And I've seen a number of Iranian exiles who are outside of the country, and their story, they mentioned that the court or someone in authority has recommended them to leave the country. How common is that case, and what benefit does the Iranian government receive by forcing them to leave their country?
Well, that's quite frequent, I would say, and I've heard this over and over. And it could be a damage control exercise by the Iranian government, in a sense that you have arrested these Christians. You know they haven't actually committed a crime, but what they have done could undermine the government. So that they truly look at activities of Christians, especially because of a huge growth in the number of people that have come from a Muslim background and to accept Christian faith. And they see this potentially damaging, both reputationally, but also, as Ayatollah Khamenei, the Iranian Supreme Leader, described it, as weakening the pillar that this whole regime is standing on. So they don't want them basically there, and they realize some of them actually convert other inmates when they go in prison. So it's they haven't done enough to secure their regime. Whether they serve their sentence and they leave, and they become even more determined. Now they have actually gained experience of what prison is like, but probably are wiser and more effective. So the pressure on leaving the country is quite frequent. And as I said, many of them face that pressure to leave the country before they actually serve the sentence, and some of them even after. And what they gain is less of a problem with the international community. So right now, if we quote the number of people that are in prison, they have to respond to UN mandate holders, for example, or if they want to have trades with, say, EU or other parts of the international community, and if there is advocacy done and they are facing these questions about individuals that their rights are being violated, they have to offer an explanation. And of course, that just distracts them from what they want to do. Mm-hmm. So they don't want the extra headache, and that's why they prefer for them to leave the country.
As we dive deeper in today's conversation with Mansour Borji, Advocacy Director for Article 18, I want to take a moment to invite you to take action. Share this episode to spread awareness about the struggles of Christians in Iran. Pray for those facing persecution. Your prayers can uplift and protect those in need. And would you please support Heart for Iran Ministries in our mission to promote religious freedom and provide vital assistance to those who cannot speak for themselves. Together, we can help bring hope and change to a region that desperately needs it. Thank you for your support. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
Article 18 co-writes the yearly report on rights violation against Christians in Iran. What is your method for documenting? And also, what trends stood out the most in 2024 edition?
Well, it takes a lot of efforts, to be honest, throughout the year. And it's really painful as well when you listen to actual victims, that you do a whole process of verification of the document that you receive. You seek legal advice on what you hear and what you read, correspond with other stakeholders to ensure that all the information you receive in your document is aligned. We spend endless hours speaking to the individuals and to hear sometimes not so important details from their view, but for us is clear signs of right violations. For instance, I just had a conversation with someone, and he says, I know they treated me actually okay. I was not under a whole lot of pressure. But then as you asked him to describe the situation, you realize he was sleep deprived. That's one form of torture, according to international definition. It was sensory deprivation. He was denied the right to attorney, and all kinds of different things emerge from that. And you just have to extract this from them because they're not aware of their rights, and therefore they think it was okay because I was not killed, I was not hanged right away. So it is when you hear them and you your ears are legally trained, you pick up those things and you help them and their lawyers to defend them better. So you asked me also about what trends emerged, and that's one aspect of our report, our annual report, that we make sure that we make sense of what we read from the data to others who look into our reports, policymakers and legal experts. And I think there's a number of them that are identified. One of them was targeting finances. So Christian ministries that try to assist the local church in Iran one way or another. Of course, at one point, they need to help them financially as well. And especially Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has been involved in tracking finances and financial transactions to see non-Christians if they have received any funding from abroad. And for those of us who are involved in advocacy, we realized that a few years ago, the Iranian government tried to amend certain articles in the Islamic Penal Code and reserving harsher punishment for any financial transactions with entities abroad. So we realized they have been very systematic in going for and researching Christians' financial activities. And if they found anyone who had received funding for whatever, if it was aid or church ministry, they were penalized. There were lengthy prison sentences, which has become every year an increasing occurrence. We had confiscation of people's properties and vilification of Narcotic Anonymous. In fact, they've really focused on this, as many people who were marginalized and abandoned by the Iranian government, despite many people every year being hanged for smuggling drugs in Iran. Iran is one of the top countries in the number of executions carried out, but it seems to be their only response to the bigger issue. And when gladly, of course, some of these converts, some of these people who are struggling with drug addiction are introduced to Narcotic Anonymous, and through that to Christian faith, they make an immediate bridge, and they realize, how they can have a transformed life, both physically but also spiritually. And many of them convert, and other friends join them too. And that's not something the Iranian government likes, because now they've become positive individuals contributing to their society and their family, and now they hold churches, and it's not a good reflection of a government that talks the talk but never walks the walk. And the vilification of this group is one of the main observations of our last year.
So obviously, this positive change is credited to Christianity, and Islam is more found bankrupt when it comes to these social changes. You mentioned that most of these people who've been questioned and under persecution, they don't know about their rights, and once they don't know, they don't demand it. Let me ask you two questions. First, would a systematic and structural approach in teaching and educating people would benefit them, the Church of Iran? And second, if they know, is there a realistic opportunity for them to exercise these rights?
Absolutely, and that's a need that we have identified, and we have taken action. We have a course that we use both in person and online to train ordinary house churches. It's one thing to have a training about these things to well-educated or probably legally trained people, and the other is for ordinary housewife or somebody who's a taxi driver and doesn't know a thing about the law,
Yes.
to be able to translate these highly complex concepts and break it down to memorable things and ensure that when the time comes, they're able to tap into this knowledge and use it to not only defend themselves but others around them. That's it's a critical, and that's why actually one aspect of our work, in addition to advocacy and documentation and raising awareness, is training. Speaking with a couple in their 60s and 70s, telling them, how they need to legally be notified of the charges they're facing before they give up any interrogation. Or, for instance, they're not obliged to respond to any questions that is can be perceived as inquisition or digging into what they believe according to the Constitution. As something as simple as that, they could protect them. But if you engage in theological discussions with them, which are really trained and cunning in getting you to say something that could be interpreted as insult to Islam, or something that could be used against you in the court of law, then knowing that you could avoid it just by exercising your rights. And those are just some of the examples.
Would you say, even though if they know their rights and they demand it to be respected and exercised, depending on authorities who are capturing these people and holding them in prison and jail, they can be simply ignored, and as you mentioned on the report, that they've been tortured without without any excuse. That will happen. That is always a possibility, that their rights are just being ignored and they go through the torture and eventually they're always being charged with the espionage or any other label that they may not have committed, any crime they have not committed.
Yes, absolutely. So we're not talking about very law-abiding states. We're a state that has pseudo-democratic laws. That means they have the laws that is copied from the Swiss and Belgian constitution, and they try to write these legal documents and that is acceptable to the international community. But when it comes to practice, it could be completely different. So what good does it have for ordinary church members to learn these things about the law? First of all, you're not going to make a lawyer out of the churchgoer.
Sure.
But the very basics that protects them and others. Why is that important? Even if it's broken, keep that constantly in front of people. Oh, you've lived abroad for me too long, and you think these guys are the same law enforcement officers in your country residents. I said, no, let me get this right. When you know what your rights are, first of all, you are more resilient. So you don't think I have committed a crime. Knowing that what you do in your private home with other Christians, actually understanding that evangelizing, according to Iranian international commitment to Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, which are signatory, they have given you this right. They are the ones who are taking it away. They are the lawbreakers, not you. Just that transforms you. It gives you resilience. You're not in a defense. It could be actually an offense. What have I done wrong? Just tell me. Isn't this my right? So building resilience is one of them. Secondly, you're not easily broken and threatened. So therefore you keep very critical information to yourself and do not give up information about others in your house church or activities that could undermine other people's security. That's 2. 3, they talk about religious issues of difference, and you get carried away. You could say something that could undermine your case. So that's another way. Lastly, it may not do you any good while you're there. They can hit you back even harder when you quote them these legal provisions, But what it does is when you're released after the investigatory period, then you can go back to a lawyer, and he's going to defend you now in court. And you can remember everything that they did was against the law, and you tell your lawyer, he builds a very good defense. You tell him when they came, they did not have a warrant. They did not show me a warrant, so that was illegal arrest. They arrested me, they blindfolded me, and they kept me in detention for 5 days before anybody came to see me. And I was not informed of my charges. That's 2, illegal detention. Then it was torture. Then it was this, and it was that. So it basically allows the lawyer to do the job for you. And not only that, it discredits your accusers because they pretend that you have done something illegal. It exposes them that they're the lawbreakers. They're the ones who are violating national and international law.
Very insightful answer. I really appreciate it. That helps me understand and put it in perspective for me. United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has called Iran a country of particular concern many times. When you brief governments or United Nations, what specific recommendations do you push for that are most likely to have an effect in the near future?
Well, we make recommendations to the Iranian government. If they want to be a nice player in the international community, they have to ensure that they fulfill their commitments, both nationally, as I said, and internationally. Secondly, for the governments that deal with them, we need to hold them accountable too, because the country that I live, here is in the United Kingdom, of course, they have some level of trade. Other countries have more or less. But when you ask these governments, and they always say, we prioritize we prioritize human rights, and particularly fundamental rights like religious freedom in all our dealings with other governments. But to turn that from just the word to action means that we would hold them accountable for any partnership or agreement or incentive that they give to this government. So even sometimes naming an individual that is incarcerated because of their religious activities can affect their how they're treated in prison, but also maybe secure their freedom. But then tackling the root causes, not just one prisoner or one church that is shut down, but the policies that leads to this ongoing treatment of Christians and other religious minorities, that has got to be addressed. It is significant how few countries do show care in Iran's Universal Periodic Review. Every country in the world that is part of the United Nations, every 4 years, get to be seated and questioned by other member states about their human rights records. Iran does the same thing. Mm-hmm. This year, it was their turn. And we sent submissions prior to the session, 6 months before other NGOs have done. And then member states reading those reports from NGOs and from their own researchers in the government, they come up with a set of questions and their recommendations to Iran to implement and report back next 4 years when it's their turn again. So then you go through the list. Maybe a handful of countries ever mention religious freedom, or particularly Christians. So that's concerning. We need to change that. We've got many churches around the world that can mandate their governments who rely on their votes to make sure you talk tough with Iran and about Iran, but when it gets where it matters, you need to show up.
Right. Mansour, let me ask you the last question, and that is, how has digital surveillance changed how people follow Jesus, how churches work, and how pastors care for their members?
I think any technology comes with with its own blessings and curses, right? So AI, celebrated by many, use it as an opportunity. I remember still COVID, when everybody was happy that at least there's still a medium to connect with other people. But then at the same time, it came with a cost. It meant the governments also were getting more clever about using it for their purposes. And Iranian government is one of the first in the entire region to invest so much on digital and also AI now, and crack down on activities of those who they see as subversive. So if you notice probably in the video that the Iranian state media showed of a number of Christians that have been arrested, they went through a Zoom meeting some of them had. And so that means an informant from the Iranian government had infiltrated and now was in a Zoom call, and you could identify people that were there and the connection and what they said and where the meetings were taking place and what's the plan, next plan. So it's become a lot easier for them. And that's why over the years, one of the first things that the agents confiscate when a raid and arrest of Christian house churches takes place is to take away all their phones and digital devices and extract more information. They probably put them in a detention for 2 or 3 days, don't even go to say hello to them. Why? Because they're looking through their digital communication to draw patterns and find out details of their activities, which is quite concerning, which means education on digital security is important, and it's becoming even more complicated with the new technologies coming in. So
do you think, I mean, you have the reports going back for many, you've been in this ministry and service to Iranian church for a long time. Do you think the arrests are slowing down these past couple of years, or it's being picked up?
Well, this year we had quite concerning rise, and it's been steadily going up. Hardly even during the COVID, when even Christians were not able to meet. There were still arrests of Christians happening, but they picked up again as soon as the restrictions were lifted. And this year with the war, of course, the Iranian government became quite anxious and paranoid about its security, their failure in detecting threats from a foreign country. They turned to exert control and a show of power to the most vulnerable, and that was Christians and other religious minorities were the first victims. In fact, 2 days after the ceasefire, they began crackdown and arrest of a nationwide group of Christians, which they kind of proudly celebrated on national state TV. So yes, we have seen an increase, and as I said in the beginning, if that level of impunity they feel is not challenged and changed, we're going to see further rise of arrest and persecution of Christians in Iran.
That is very interesting. At the same time, in the surface, looks like it's a lot more freedom is given to the people in general, but at the same time, these systematic crackdowns has increased. Thank you, Mansour, for what you do. For your organization is focused on, and it is really needed. And I think a lot of organizations who are focused on needs to learn and be educated, and in own terms to be able to contribute to what you guys are doing. And may God bless you. And thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Edwin, for having me on this wonderful podcast, and wishing you all the best, and looking forward to watching every other episode you have.
Thank you for being here today, Mansour. Your dedication, clarity, and bravery continue to show people things that most people never get to see. Thank you for your voice and for all the hard work you do in Article 18 for people who cannot speak for themselves. Thanks to everyone who is watching or listening for being here. If you care about this conversation, please subscribe, share this episode, and stay in touch. Visit www.heartforiran.com to find out more or help us with our mission. Your involvement and generosity help us give the people of Iran hope, truth, and support. And I'm grateful you were here with us. And until the next conversation, stay informed, stay inspired, and keep your voice unmuted.